and we're going live, everyone. Thank you again for joining us. Today we do book club. For those of you who are just, this is your first time, we do book club every third Sunday of the month at this time. Normally I try and get our books up a few weeks before we're actually reading them, but sometimes it's only about 2 weeks. However, at the end of book club, we always discuss our next read. So if you're here regularly, you will always know what we are reading. About 2 weeks. However, at the end of book club, we always discuss our next read. So if you're, pardon me for that momentary glitch. All right, everyone, thank you so much. And now it is my very, very great pleasure to introduce our wonderful guests, Danielle and Day, who are the authors of the book we just read, Baba Ali and the Clockwork Djinn. Thank you both so much for being here with us. I know you're both in colder climes, so that you also have your tea and are keeping warm. So thank you so much for being here. Now, I do have a few questions for you both about the book, and one of the things I'm really curious about is how you came to collaborate in the first place. How did you meet and how did you decide to write a book together?
Well, I am the guilty party here. I started out as an author and an anthologist, and I'm always coming up with various ideas for such things. I'm best known for the Badass Fairies anthologies and support staff on the Defending the Future anthologies. And we were approached to create a book of steampunk fairy tales, which is Gaslight and Grimm. And I knew right away that I wanted to do Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves. My mother worked for CBS Records, and one year I got a Christmas album that was Beauty and the Beast on one side and Baba Ali on the other, or Ali Baba. And I wore out the Ali Baba side.
Oh, that's lovely.
When we decided that we were going to do steampunk fairy tales, there was no question that that one was going to be mine. Unfortunately, I wanted to do it properly. So Day was a friend of mine, and I was like, this is my idea. Would you be my cultural consultant? Because I wanted it to be authentic. And it's not just a matter of the right cultural beliefs, but also the storytelling style, because that is a very strong tradition in that culture. And I wanted to bring those elements in. And Day was gracious enough to agree to help me out. And we had so much fun with the back and forth on what could and could not be done and how to do it, that it just made more sense to make her a collaborator.
That's fantastic. So, and how did you were already friends? Did you meet through academia, through fandom? What's your friends meet cute, if you don't mind sharing? Because I love those. I love hearing about how people become friends and collaborators.
Day, turn on your microphone.
I am listening. I'm enjoying. I'm taking it in like everybody else here.
I started doing conventions. My first book came out in 2001. 2003, I started doing conventions. And that's how I met Day and her wife and her whole posse of friends. And like I said, I'm best known for the Badass Fairies anthology. So a lot of people, I came to their attention because of those books. And there were 4 total. There may be more. We took a bit of a break. And so Day was a fan before she was a friend, but very quickly transitioned.
Now, Day, you talked a little bit earlier, before we started book club, you pointed out some of your fandom roots. And so I just want to direct everyone's eyes to the Castle Grayskull behind Day on the shelf. So Day, what was your sort of entree into fandom, and how did you get hooked into steampunk?
Well, oh goodness, that is so fandom is an easy one actually, because I actually met Danny at my what would have been probably my very first science fiction and fantasy convention, which
I had no
was
clue.
Balticon, and it was the year they had Neil Gaiman, because like everyone else, everyone loves Neil Gaiman. So I'm like, oh, he's going to be in Baltimore. It's not far. Let's go. And oh, that first year, what is this? Who are these people? They love. I'm like, you know, you're that kid. You read the science fiction in shame, and you know, because I hope nobody noticed you were reading the kiddie books about dragons and things. So this is the first time as an adult. I'm like, holy crap, that's awesome. So yeah,
My people.
right, you have that moment. Yeah, I grew up overseas. I don't have an accent when I speak English, but I also don't have an accent when I speak Arabic either, so what little I speak anymore. So so it's one of those things where it just wasn't there was no community, there's no people you talk to about it. If I'm smart, I'll talk about the nonfiction books I read, not the science fiction and fantasy. So that's where that entree came in. For steampunk, I love history. I love history in all its forms and things like that. And so alternate history is a next step, but alternate history tends to be one, sometimes a little bit more dull, and two, everything I saw was more Civil War oriented, which while I find fascinating, steampunk takes that what if and makes it bigger. And the biggest reason I fell for it and fell pretty hard was, if you think about it, right? Science fiction has always talked what it involves technology, the same way steampunk involves technology. But science fiction, a lot of times, especially when you're a big fan of Star Trek, which I also talks about the idea of the hope and the opportunity and the discovery. And steampunk is that same thing, because yes, there is a whole lot of colonial and misogynistic bullshit from that time period in history, you know, and we have to embrace and recognize that. But at the same time, when it comes to the idea of science and technology, this is the time period where the whole world was excited about it and saw a whole new opening. And it's that sense of hope and excitement that exists in steampunk that excites, that appreciates me. So it's kind of like retro science fiction is what it is.
Some of us even refer to it as retrofuturism. So I think you've really hit on that very important element. And I do have another sort of question, because you shared before we got started that you do write a lot of nonfiction, but also you're a documentary maker. Did you find that all of your research skills that you bring to those art forms were also just, did it give you more excuses to go down the research rabbit hole? It's really what I'm asking.
No, that's a terrible question, because you know what the answer is. It means I can spend 6 hours on exactly what kind of material somebody's wearing, and what kind of fighting style. I'm going to watch like 3 hours worth of fight videos about Egyptian stick fighting. Yes. And my wife's like, "What are you doing? It's 4 a.m." I'm like, "Shh, I'm watching
Research.
Research. This is important."
There's so many elements of the book that between Day and I, we found actual elements in history to lend authenticity to the book. And it was all just there. We didn't have to make up a lot of stuff. You know, the book of knowledge of ingenious mechanical devices was a godsend. It was the roots of our story. And the stick fighting that Day mentioned, and just little touches that immersed you in the world that we wanted to create.
Well, I must confess something that I did not share before we started today. I do speak Turkish, and I spent some time studying the languages of the Middle East and North Africa and culturally. And so for me, I was immediately drawn in with all of these details that you used as the foundation for the story. And I loved how much time you gave on the page to not just doing a wash across the story, but they're intrinsic and important elements. So thank you for the gift of that. Sort of, how do I want to put it? It's more than just, you're not just pulling back a curtain and giving us a glimpse of a culture. You're really inviting us to have more understanding of the cultural foundation for the story. So thank you. That wasn't a question, that was me fangirling. I apologize. So
no apology needed.
no, it was really beautiful. So I do wonder a bit, because so much of steampunk is set in England in particular. There's an affinity for England for reasons which we could unpack, but that's beyond the scope of today. Did you feel a weighty responsibility in taking the stories and moving out of there, and like maybe there was more of a like really microscopic review of your work, because people had some judgments they were bringing to it by virtue of you going outside of the typical story?
I like to turn expectations on their ear. And I specifically went for this story because I wanted to take it out of the realm of what everybody was already doing.
Lovely.
This is a whole complete world. And that means that the elements that we're exploring touch every culture in some way. And you can create such a richer story if you explore outside of that tight circle everybody expects.
Well, thank you for going there. I, for one, am always, despite appearances, I love leaving England. And I really like reading stories that are beyond the scope of simply Albion. But I know sometimes there's a more of a fixation on the things you do wrong than everything you do right when you rock the boat a little bit. So thank you for taking that opportunity to rock the boat anyway. It's beautifully done.
Thanks today, the elements that they would have called us out on were spot on.
Yeah, I think we got called out a little more on the England section than we did anywhere else.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, that seemed pretty accurate to me. Grey, people with moustaches, a lot of water and coldness. Yeah, no, and tea. You got it. England was fine.
We actually get called out for spending too much time in England.
All right, yeah. Well, I mean, you are setting the stage not just for the story to come, but for Ollie's background and experience and this sort of wonderful love affair he's having as a student before he leaves. But also, I think the things that have given him some resilience in facing what's coming. So I thought it was just the right amount. But again, I'm fangirling. So I apologize. Normally I restrain myself more. So let's let me not be too greedy and spend all of my time with you. I would like to open the floor up a bit to our wonderful guests who are here, our book club crew, the Temporal Entourage. Hello, everyone. So I'm just going to go around, and normally I ask you to introduce yourself a little bit, very brief, like say your name. And if you're new to steampunk, for our newcomers, and then share, today my question is for you to start, share something you loved about the book. And if you didn't love the book, you can share a criticism, but, you know, remember to be, you know, kind. All right.
It is what we learn from.
Yeah. I'd say constructive is probably the word I was looking for. All right, Bill, would you like to get us started?
Sorry, my wife was texting me from.
Oh, it's all right.
I would love to. So questions. Tell me
Bill?
about where you
Bill?
cited.
Bill, before you get going with your questions, I actually had a question for you, which I don't
Okay.
think you heard. It's all right. I was just asking something you loved about the book that you'd like to share with all of us.
Oh, I find it difficult to pick out a single thing that I loved about this book. It was just I felt transported back. I mean, to days of my youth and reading the Arabian Nights, and just the you know, the immersion in the culture that was in this book was fantastic. It made me feel like I was back in Egypt. In fact, it was fantastic. So I loved all of that about the book. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. And I promise I will come back because I do know you have some questions as well, but I'm just sort of
Okay.
warming us all up.
I have several. So if there's a lull,
There won't be for long.
All right, good. Thank you. Otherwise, I'll just start effusing over how much I love the book again. Lady June Squirrel, looking very dapper.
I note that I'm wearing the blouse that you gave me a year ago.
I did notice. You look so great.
At the time of the Wild Wild West Con, the last convention that we were able to attend.
Our last hurrah before the lockdown.
You know, it's interesting. We read it in the book group, what, about 5 years ago? Maybe.
I think so.
It has to have been long enough that Clem was still out of the care home and everything.
Yes.
Before. Anyway, I have a copy of that, and I also went ahead and bought the digital copy because I much prefer to read things that way. And I noted that there are illustrations.
Yeah.
And they're wonderful. They are so detailed and so full. I don't know whether they're in the recent print copy, but they're certainly, yes. Like, anyway, obviously they are. Then anyway, they're great. And I also noted when I was reading some of the comments that you had maybe made on the Facebook, that you tightened things up or you redid some things with that people had made. I would love to know at this point what those things were.
So some of the reviewers, now to be fair, reviewers are more critical. That's their purpose. And so they said that some of the villains were a little too cardboard. And then there's other things that we ourselves noted. No book is ever complete. There's always things that you miss or things that can be improved because you're learning continually. And so there were some elements that we had missed in the first book, like in this culture, women can own property. And so there was no reason for Ali to marry his sister-in-law because she could just own the company outright. But you did need someone to help raise the son or daughter or whatever it was to be a co-parent for that. And so little elements like that we adjusted to be more authentic and to have more well-rounded characters where we may have rushed through a little bit too much the first time around.
Yeah, it's hard to soften the villain without really changing the storyline. But one of the things I know we focus on in particular was the brother's wife. And if the second version, she is definitely a much more nuanced character, and you start to see a woman who's caught in some circumstances maybe a little beyond her control, and at the same time she's also trying to take charge of her own life, and there's that give take and the same very human emotions of jealousy and and even a little bit of greed and regret and this multitude of things. And I think at least for her, the rewrite just adds a whole nother layer to her that I'm very proud of what we did. And, it's one of those, like I say, a book's never done, because I'd be like, we could go back through and do that for every for the other characters. And it's like, no, this book is done, Day. It's time to move on to, I'm like, all right, Danny, you're right. Damn it.
I don't think you could improve Rasul though. It's definitely.
Well, thank
Anyway.
you. And the funny thing is that's one of the characters that they had issue with. But when you're retelling a fairy tale, you have certain things that you have to observe. Otherwise, you're no longer retelling the fairy tale. And that was the whole point of these thieves, that they were very focused and they were ruthless. And especially with the back history that we gave them, it's really hard to change that because they've been trapped for an extreme amount of time. They have gone beyond a normal span of life. Anybody they cared about is gone. There is no other aspect to their life except for trying to break this curse.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lady June Squirrel. Excellent question. Hello, Beatrix and Carolius. How are you both?
Excellent, thank you.
Very well, thank you.
So good to see you.
I'm sipping my Egyptian ginger and licorice tea.
Oh, that sounds good.
Nice.
Lovely.
Well, let's see.
You want to start?
Yeah, you go ahead and start.
Okay, so I have to say that, I mean, it's a delightful book. I liked it the first time, but one of the things that I wanted to say is I like how it illustrates a different direction, because steampunk and so many other things are kind of forced by the publishers into certain kinds of memes. You know, everybody's got to be a warrior. They've got to solve some horrible, awful murder. They've got to, you know, the fixation on people fighting and killing people and being in the middle of a war is just so draining sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And it was such a joy to have a different kind of a book, to have somebody laying out in their mind what was a right action, what was ethical to do, how to be in the world was so refreshing.
Thank you. Setting this in the Middle East, we had to observe that portion of the culture, because especially in that time period, you would not have diverged from that. Not just from a faith base, but just from a cultural base. It would have been extremely taboo.
I like the time spent in London. In some ways, it reminded me of the, well, less travailing interactions, but nevertheless, a kind of position that Ramanujan had at Oxford. And here and the study of Ali with Babbage, bringing Babbage in. Who would have thought Babbage would be flying on a ship across, you know, latitudes to bring a message to Ali? You know, that was really nicely done, and it brought in the book of wonderful machines and so forth. So it really set the stage. And I also like a kind of cultural mixing, you know. There was, for instance, like, okay, they're going to get to the cave. I wonder whose treasure is in there. Nadir Shah's. Wow, how did that happen? Well, that would be a story in itself. I like the idea that the djinns, you know, became so powerful. And wow, that would be another great backstory, a steampunk story featuring the djinn. And in fact, I think somewhere in there, the idea of magic as a source of energy, you know, to heat the water and things and make the steampunk contrivances work was really elegant, because it allowed for the construction of super fine work that in other steampunk novels always seem rather taxing when you consider that you have to burn charcoal and this and that to make everything work. Now you somehow have some magical space. Perhaps in science fiction we would call it, 0-point energy. It's something like that activates the whole mechanism. So I found everything really very interesting, and yeah. I'd also like the kinds of characters you brought in. The Americans come in and out with their airship, and then the plant in Ali's room. What was that, Rahim or Rahman? Anyway, yeah, you knew that. Well, this guy is going to be a plant, but how's he going to play that? And then we see how that works out. So there were just so many things going on there that were, oh yeah, the biting donkey. No expedition is complete without one.
Love the donkey.
I love to introduce elements like that because it rounds out the world. It makes it tactile and real and things that people can relate to, even when you're presenting them with a fantastic.
Right. And if you've ever been around some of those donkeys, they are mean little bastards. The only thing worse are the camels.
Yeah. What was that?
I said the only thing worse are camels.
Oh, the camels. Yeah.
They are nasty.
That's why ours were mechanical.
Thank you, Carolius. Thank you, Beatrix. We will probably come back to you, as you know how I am. Hello, Kelly. How nice to meet you. Thank you for joining us.
Hello.
So I know you're already a fan of Danielle's, but perhaps you'd like to share something you loved about this book. And if you're new to steampunk, what did you think? But if you're a steampunk denizen, please just share a detail about yourself.
Oh, God, I'm with Bill. I literally love everything about this book. I mean, just the cover. I mean, hello. It's so pretty. I love the dialogue. I love the language. I'm a sucker for good dialogue in any kind of media format. And it was just so lyrical and and the formality, and it kind of reminded me a little bit of Stephen Bruce and his the Taltos world. But it just painted that picture and pulled you into that world, and it was just like, yes, can there be more?
I started out in my first 13 to 15 years as a poet, so all of my fiction is lyrical in some way.
Yes.
Beautiful. So I love the comparison to Stephen Bruce. I don't know that many people who still read him. I always loved those Taltos books.
Phoenix Guards. I love that book. Love it.
Great. Well, Kelly, it's very nice to have you amongst us, and I hope you will join us in the future as well. We're always happy to have new friends who love to read.
Yay.
All right, Charity, I know you've been nail biting. Ready. Hello.
So I absolutely adored the book to an extent that was ridiculous. I read it in ebook form and then I listened to the audiobook 3 times in a weekend. I work very long shifts. It's not my fault. But I love how I could be in the world and feel the world. Not just, oh, it's really cool that Ali is doing this and it's really neat that, these characters, it was, oh, I'm there. Oh, crap. Raz is right behind me. I loved that. It's one of the first books that I've read that did not make me go, I don't like his characters. I loved everybody.
Oh.
Everybody.
Thank you, Charity.
We worked real hard for that kind of realism. And every so often you'll see me pop links in there. And for that chase in Jerusalem with the guy, I'm like, one of the links there is like, so what do we know about the different core stuff? Like we sat down and both of us had, this is the map of Jerusalem from around that time period. So here's where they're running through the alley. Here's where this section happens. So it
Maps
actually
and
is,
photographs and pictures of the flowers and all of that, everything that we could give a sensual experience of, we looked for it all.
yeah. So I ended up trying to put some of the stuff.
Beautiful.
So it ends up being very, very real. And then so you see what's the bits and pieces, and what ended up the background I think that Danny and I had was, we have the West and the UK where you can say that magic has died down or isn't viewed of it as much interest, which is why Babbage makes fun of him for his leaving milk out. You know, we have as we travel east, we have the Middle East where there's this merging of mechanics and magic. And then we go all the way to the Far East where you actually would see magic as being higher within and as far as a hierarchy. And you see that in the way that Himitsubako is built. And so the idea is how the world came together and what was emphasized by what parts of the world.
I loved that. And also I have to say, as we're discussing Jerusalem, the moment they start eating the orange when they go through the gate, I was just right there. I could smell everything. It was beautiful. So thank you, Charity. Great observations. All right, Laura, hello, my dear. Looking very dapper.
Thank you. I also loved the book. I loved all the attention to detail and the world building. I really loved the puzzle boxes and the idea of that Ali was trained from a very young age to do more and more complex puzzles as part of his training to be an artificer. And I liked Ali's faith and the fact that even though he had a very deep-seated faith himself, that he didn't try and press it on other people. He was content to let other people believe the way that they believed and, you know, debate with them in a friendly way.
Usually. Maybe that one Anglican.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the evangelical aspect of faith is pretty small, you know, depending on where you are. We have the whole story of the Crusades, but in general, most of the time there's a lot of live and let live. If you think between East and West, you always meet some folks are out there who are out there. But I'm like, the idea of showing faith the way it is exists for most people. It's an underlying tenet that defines your person and shapes your personal values, right? And you know, some people believe this much, some people believe this much, you know, but it plays a role. And even if you don't believe it all, the fact you're in a society where that is a big part is important. And I think that was one of the reasons we put it in, because I think in many ways, a lot of science fiction and fantasy, unless they do the weird cleric, but they never talk about how faith impacts everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, look at how much it has shaped our world now, right? We've got nothing else, the rise of the Catholic Church, the property owning by the church, the way it shaped the world and the way people lived and the rules for men and women and everything. And so in many ways, keeping it out of fiction sets up a fake world, you know? So if we're diving into characters for whom faith is important, let's have that be there.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about this dialogue in the book is that all of the conversations about faith developed organically. We didn't actually have to introduce them. It was a natural outcome of the interaction of the characters. And we've both learned that when the characters start to speak to you, you listen. Because if you try to force them down the path that you want them to go, you steal the life from the book.
Lovely. Thank you. Yeah, I want to add to this. It's something you did so beautifully, and it plays in part with the discussion of faith, is that rather than have Ali be a fish out of water and have that story where other people are explaining England to him all the time and, you know, explaining how the world works to him, he's instead reacting to the world and explaining to us how the world works from his perspective. And I really loved that change. It's so subtle, but for me, it made the story 1,000 times better.
You guys are so good for us.
I was going to say, I'm like, yes. And I've never been able to say it that concisely. So like, Danny, we need to write that down so we can use that as our explanation in the future.
Fortunately, it's on video recorded because I'll never remember what I said. So, all right, Karen. Oh, Karen Carlisle.
Hello.
Extraordinaire.
I'm Karen. I write steampunk. I've been doing this steampunk thing for over 13 years and I'm in Australia. Hello. What I like about the book is the way you had gadgets and steampunk and a different culture all put in together. And I was going to say before this conversation came up that you put faith and science being able to coexist, which so many people think it can't. And I deal with that every day. So, but I did like the way it. So many people, well, not so many, but some people will write a steampunk book and then just whack some gears on it type thing. And the gadgets you had were part of Ali and his thinking and his upbringing and his culture as well. And the way you put that all together, and the fact that he did still have his cultural beliefs and beliefs in magic, because in this case, magic is real. And the fact that he can do science stuff as well. And yeah, that's probably the thing I like the best. Oh, and airships.
As a Christian fantasy and fiction writer,
yep, ditto.
Faith is very important to me because I understand how they are not separate things.
Yes.
And I don't have to be tied to believing in God and wanting to explore fantasy and science fiction. And
I had that, yeah.
So many people, unfortunately, have a much narrower view. I've been told I will be going to hell just based on the fact that there's science fiction and fantasy titles on my table. And then on the other side, I've had my pastor be fully supportive of me and what I'm doing. So
when I was at school, even this is just in high school, and of course everything since then, I wasn't allowed to do physics and maths and chemistry and that, and do art as well. They said you either had to do the art course or the science course, and so I went and did science. And it comes at you from all sorts of directions, particularly from education. And then, of course, you get out in the real world, and then you've got a lot of people saying you can't have science. You know, you either have to do science or religion, and it's not. Yeah.
I can multitask. Trust me.
It's well, I've had both all my life, and I constantly am trying to explain this to people. So it was actually really nice to read both in there. So
I was very fortunate in my upbringing, in that I pretty much raised myself. So restrictions weren't put on me. I was taken to the library. I was given a library card, and I was told as many as you can carry. And that was my life growing up. And my mom, you know, I had my own living room, and my mom stayed in hers with her partner. And, you know, kids were not allowed to go in there. So I pretty much developed my own concepts of what the world is and is not supposed to be. And I never ended up forming that restriction on myself that people do from societal pressure.
My family, when I was young, the family was also always, if you got the brains, go to uni, and we were quite religious. My grandfather was a lay preacher, and but when it was the high school itself that had we're all into sports, so you know. But I actually went up to the principal's office. I remember that, and I had this big long stack of research thing about, you know, you have Brian May who does science and art. So it's not religion, but yeah, art. And then you have Da Vinci did art and science, and we did this whole thing, and they still wouldn't let me do it. And then, of course, as I got older and part of the family went a bit more fundamental, now there's the you can't believe in science and religion. So I've had both ends from different people along the way, and stuff it. I'm having both.
Well, thank you, Karen. And I know a number of us have read Karen's books, but if you have not, I recommend Karen's writing to you. She's a delight on the page and in person. Thank you. Alicia, hello, my dove. Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm okay.
Staying warm, I hope.
Yeah, it's not too bad here. We got snow earlier in the week, like we do, and then it goes away. And it's cold for 3 weeks, and because I'm at the far end of New York State, so we're not like central New York, which just gets pounded for like 5 months. So it's not too bad here. It's just cold.
So what did you like about the book?
Well, I haven't quite finished it yet.
That's all right.
Not because of the writing, just because of
life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Just wave your hands in the air.
We'd much rather you take your time and enjoy it.
Yeah, I am. I do. But one of the things that when I was reading, I was like, oh, for dang bloody God, was the way you use the term artificer. The way it's used in the West is completely different than the way it's used in the East. And it was very much that idea that it is a different type of science. It's a more physical type of science. One of my areas of geekdom is the development of scientific thought from the Middle Ages to I start to fall apart about the Age of Enlightenment, about 1700s, but that in another group that I was a part of, a lot of the classes that I taught were about that mentality of science and religion within the Middle Ages, and as we find our way into the Renaissance, and how it's completely different from a modern setting. So if you're going to read these, here's the mindset you need. And I have very much a background in that. So that was kind of I'm like, yes, somebody knows what they're doing. That and the references to Tib, of course. I live near the Canadian border, and there's a gentleman in Hamilton, which when the border opens again sometime, who teaches Tatib. So it was really kind of cool to I know this is really annoying. I should practice this. But yeah, I did. I as everyone else has said, the world is very it's very engaging, and it's very much a part of it. I liked the idea that everything is from the viewpoint of Ali, and from a non-Western viewpoint. So there's this idea of you get this sense of, oh well, yeah, actually that's kind of how they would think that, wouldn't it? So I think everyone has said that, and I think it's very true. And it's Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves. I mean, come on.
Absolutely. Thank you, Alicia. I'm glad you're staying warm. Hello, Janet. How good to see you. Don't forget to unmute yourself. Hello.
Hello. Interesting that they were talking about snow, because I was snowbound for the President's Day weekend, and then it warmed up to 50 just in time for me to go back to work.
Oh.
Fun. Lovely. So tell me what's something you enjoyed about our book this month.
Boy, it's hard to come up with something this late in the game that somebody else hasn't already mentioned.
It's all right if you double dip. I'm still happy to hear.
But I did like the fact that Ali was still a Muslim in London and was accepted for it.
Absolutely. or at least not too reviled.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, and I liked his interplay with Babbage about religion in science too. I thought that was really delightful. Well, I'm glad you're here, Janet. I don't think you made it last month, or I don't remember January. So I'm happy to see you back.
No, I know I didn't make it last month.
So, oh, good. I'm glad you remember because it's a blur in my brain. So, well, stay warm. You know, I'll be back around to ask you more questions. So I'll let you ponder. All right, Catherine, hello.
Oh, I've really been enjoying the discussion, and everyone's cut all the major points, but I was really taken by the Falcon. And at first I was saying, well, it seems, how do we go to England? It's small, and then when I found out it was a Djinn, that made perfect sense.
Absolutely.
And I love the scene where she was using magic to help weld and shape the metal.
I love those details too, and all of the artificing I thought was just really gorgeous.
My favorite part about when she's helping to meld the metal is because she is shaping herself.
Mm-hmm.
She is deciding and helping create what she will be. And that's all we can all hope to do.
That's a beautiful metaphor, isn't it? I love that. Right, so Sharon is going to view and watch today as she loves to do. Hello, Sharon. So I'm not skipping Sharon to be mean. I'm skipping Sharon so that she can just sit back and enjoy the discussion. And I'm going to jump over to Robin. Hello, Robin, my dear.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I am quite good. I have a bit of Harney and Sons cherry blossom green tea.
Excellent.
I love your mug.
Disneyland.
Ah.
It is the poisoned apple.
Love it. So please share something you enjoyed about the book.
Well, as I'm a bird person, I really enjoyed the Djinn in the Falcon. It's just like, oh, you have a protector, and we're just badass. We're just going from Middle East to England and back and up there, and I would say I was a tiny bit disappointed that there wasn't a kind of exact reunion that we could see between the two Djinns. And
it hasn't happened yet.
It hasn't happened yet.
Yeah. So I was like, valid thought. You just have to hang on and see.
Okay.
The conflict between the two of them is she feels she has failed, and she doesn't resolve that until the end of the book.
Yeah. One of the things I really loved was the depictions of Jerusalem. I have this wonderful cookbook that's about Jerusalem, written by two chefs who both grew up on different parts of it, and it has the most wonderful pictures on the inside. And I've never been to Jerusalem, but it's just like the descriptions, and I was thinking of all the pictures in this book, and I was just feeling it in my mind, because it's kind of difficult when you're going through pictures, kind of envisioning it, and it was kind of like walking through. I'm like, wait, I have pictures in here. And one of the gentlemen who worked on this also wrote a cookbook called Phalistin, which is about Palestinian food, and it has these wonderful pictures of just all of these spices. And I was just I was just in my head, just I'm walking through Jerusalem.
Oh, lovely. The smells just come right off the page practically. So, and Robin is our cooking maven. So if there is cookery to be had, Robin is the one. Thank you, Robin.
Yes, I'm not a professional chef. I just own a lot of cookbooks. Exhibit A, Exhibit B.
Well, you answer all of our questions, and I'm always grateful for that, Robin. All right, Cindy, Joy, hello. Don't forget to unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I hooked up I had to go search for I got a new camera and I had to find it, and it was on my child's computers. So of course it was.
Of course, that's how that works.
That's how that works. Because I guess he decided that that was the one we bought for his computer.
Of course.
Yeah, and now I can't turn off my sewing light.
That's all right.
So I'm going to have I don't know.
You're lovely, just as you are.
Yeah. So I really liked the blending of the Islam and culture and magic and technology all together. I thought that was really well done, and I felt like I was back in Egypt, and you really captured the I was in Cairo when I was in Egypt, and we went through the tent maker's souk, and it was one of the most foreign places I have ever been. And it was so incredible. And so you really captured that, the whole flavor of everything. It was really very well captured. But the whole, but the way that he just accepted technology and magic and religion all fitting together, and that you don't have to reject religion in order to embrace science, that they can both live in the same headspace.
To do so would be to limit God. And the point of faith is to accept that God is limitless.
Yeah, it's, yeah.
Well, thank you, Cindy, for your wonderful observations.
Yeah, and we are just like, we're already at 5:30, so.
Yes, we are. That's why I just keep us moving along.
So keep going.
Yes, thank you, Cindy. All right. Ingrid, hello.
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 Lovely to see you, Ingrid.
This is my first time, and my first book with you, so I'm excited. I was a lurker at the last one on your web space, and I thought, well, this time I'd like to join you and read the book. And it was a wonderful book as my maiden voyage.
Well, welcome, and I hope you will stay with us.
Yeah, I did want to say one of the things, and I put it in the chat, and I'm looking forward to a sequel, because I also felt like there were a lot of questions and there were a lot of things that sort of weren't finished, like the camels needed to be fixed, and the falcon, Djinn needed to be, needs his own story, I think. So, because he was such a big part of that, and I really, wanted to see more of that. And I wanted more of an explanation as to why he was a falcon and she, so I'd like to see that element be more developed. So I'm hoping that there will be a sequel. The one thing I did want to say that I really enjoyed, also because I'm an immigrant, and I got the sense when Baba Ali was in England, I couldn't, I felt like he was small and he was containing himself and staying in a very, not trying to make waves. But once he got to his homeland, it was like a breath of fresh air. He took a deep breath and he found himself, and he, really, became a much more developed person and stuff. And so I really got that sense from him, and I really love that in the story. So thank you. I'll keep it short, and wanted to just say that I really did enjoy it, and looking forward to the sequel.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ingrid. And I love that observation, because I think there's something really beautiful that Danielle and Day achieved with how they wrote Ali in England, with some very universal truths about being in a place that's not necessarily your homeland originally. And I'm so glad you joined us. Thank you, Ingrid.
Thank you.
Christina, hello. Looking very dapper in your chapeau.
Why, thank you.
You're welcome.
I really enjoyed it. I'd never seen a steampunk take on the story before and wasn't sure where it was going to go or how it was going to go. I listened to the audiobook, and your narrator was delightful, really gave a wonderful feel to the story throughout. It didn't take me long to fall into it at all and made my drive home from work each day much more pleasant.
Excellent.
But I was so happy with the ending. So many books, I feel like just kind of, they run out of time and they rush it and then they chop it off and you're like, where am I going? And I'm not satisfied. And I felt like I'd love to hear more, but I felt good about where you went at the end of it. So thank you for that as a reader. It's much appreciated.
Now, I will point out that the audiobook is the original version.
Oh.
So if you are interested in seeing how we transformed it, note that.
That's good to know.
Thank you. Lovely. And thank you, Christina. All right. Cindy, not Cindy Joy, Cindy. Are you there with us, Cindy?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hello.
I'm also here for the first time. Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed it so far. I loved the book. Everybody has said everything. But I will say I liked when the Djinn boiled the thieves. That was very unexpected for me. And it just kind of gave her a little more depth, and it was a surprise.
Thank you,
that's
Cindy.
all I have to say, and thanks for having me, and I hope to be back.
I hope you will join us again.
Yeah,
Thank you, Cindy.
the boiling of the thieves we stole from the original story. And that's one of the things we did a lot of that. So Morgiana exists in the original story. I think a lot of times what happened is and it's probably the Burton translation that brought Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves to Western culture. A lot of things got cut away. Boiling of the Thieves part sometimes gets cut away. Definitely her role sometimes doesn't exist at all. And so one of the things we did is we're going to do our new take on it based on what the original story was. And that was a big deal for us. And that's part of the reason has the role. And in some parts of Syria, and under folktales, it's referred to as Clever Morgiana is the name of the story, not Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves.
Oh, I love that. I had no idea.
So it's her story.
I did know that Burton was, how shall I say this nicely, took a lot of poetic license with his translation.
Yes. Wait, let me see. I have a great example of that. Let me, if I will find it, and I will put it in the links. It's one of my favorite things to do, and it shows the difference in translations of what he did. And I'll even just read a little bit of it. So the gloss translation is the sentences. When it was in the middle of the night, he remembered something he had forgotten in his palace. So he returned and entered his palace, finding his wife laying in her bed, embracing one of the black slaves. And seeing this, the world became black in his face. So that's like the straight up translation. Burton. But when the night was half spent, he bethought him that he had forgotten in his palace somewhat which he should have brought with him. So he returned privily and entered his apartments, where he found the queen, his wife, asleep on his own carpet bed, embracing with both arms a black cook of loathsome aspect and foul with kitchen grease and grime. When he saw this is the world waxed black before his sight. And I'm like, wait. Where did this like loathsome aspect and foul kitchen grease come from? He, because if you look at the translation of the original bit, the idea is she was sleeping with this dark cook because he was kind of hot, right? He was kind of hot. Whereas that latter one, oh no, it just suddenly changed. And I'm like, wait, you racist prick, what the hell? So
it really changes the tone and so much of the story, doesn't it? Oh, translators in the 19th century. I have opinions, but thank you for that example. That's lovely. All right. So Alan, you've been so patient. Hello, Alan.
Hello. Thank you for making me close to the end. I get to listen to everyone else's good comments. And my favorite part of the book was the sister-in-law and how she morphed from being the evil person to being, I wouldn't quite say caring, but at least a more fully rounded character. So I really, really appreciated that. And also the conversations on religion and magic and faith were very interesting. But one of the things that's interesting is in our world where we debate science and faith, there is no demonstrable magic other than show magic. So when there's a real djinn flying around and a real djinn in a clockwork body that's good enough to fool people, I think that sort of lends a whole new air to what's going on in that world. And I'm sure Babbage will change very quickly in his attitudes based on the empirical evidence that magic is there. So, which we don't really have in our current, less colorful reality. So thank you. I did enjoy the book. I really like the cultural aspects of it. And like I said, I really appreciate the sister-in-law. So my question is the nephew going to be a mechanic? Ali's nephew. Is it going to skip a generation? Because it does have the same blood, and he's going to be an artificer.
We shall see. Now, which version of the book did you read, Alan?
The audiobook, the first one.
Okay. So
you'll probably like the sister-in-law
even better
in the second one. You caught what we hinted at, and we made it more clear.
Great.
Excellent. Thank you, Alan. All right, Tracy. Hello. Are you here with us, Tracy?
I'm just lurking, really. Unfortunately, I did not finish the book in time, but
that's all
I'm
right.
so intrigued by what everybody has said that I will definitely be rushing off to finish it right away now. Thanks very much. Such a incredible cast of characters in it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you for joining us. Anne, are you here?
Yep. I don't have a whole lot of questions. I'm pretty lurking too. I've only listened to the first 5 chapters of it, and then my dogs decided to go crazy. So I've been chasing puppies today. But
oh my goodness.
So far, I really like it, and I enjoy the voice of the person who is reading it, because it adds an element to me that my brain sometimes doesn't impose on.
Thank you, Anne. Lovely. All right, Bill, you've been so patient, and I know you had a couple of questions to pose to our wonderful guests. Would you like to throw those out there?
Sure, just 1 second. Here we go. My computer went to sleep. My biggest question is where is Ali's fictional home theoretically located? I got the impression it was maybe in the northern part of Saudi Arabia or maybe Jordan. Is that close?
They'll have to answer that.
Yeah, he lives in the Najd, so it's actually would be part of Saudi Arabia, but Saudi Arabia doesn't exist.
Right.
In this time period. Yeah. So hang on, no, it's Saudi. Be more of the western side of what would be Saudi Arabia.
Right. Okay.
So
thank you.
So yeah, I put it in the Najd, and I'm like, I'm gonna leave it open beyond that area. And I think we referred to it as the Najd once. I think that's about it. So, but yeah, I put it more on the eastern side, but it'd be more like I wanted it closer to the eastern, but I wanted to keep us away from bodies of water. So you'll probably find it closer to the center. So let me see, find.
Fair enough.
Yeah, but I think that's the only time we referred to it. I think was just as the Najd.
That was really good, because I was curious as well, Bill, where I mean, I knew it was in like the Saudi Arabian Peninsula area, that part of the world, but not as sort of specific.
Yeah, no, it's if you look at it, it's beautiful desert out there, just for miles. So yeah, actually, you just look up Nejd and hit images. I bet you'll come up with a bunch of stuff. So.
Bill, did you have any other questions for our wonderful guests today?
No, I think we've covered it pretty nicely, and we're running a little late too. So I'll just
Cindy has something.
I'll just keep my peace.
Yeah, Cindy, but also I know Karen has a question. So Karen, if you would.
Yeah, I think you've sort of answered some of it, but it's brought up another question. I was going to say, how much did it actually alter from the original to what we know as Ali Baba, and in how much of the original did you use, and did you write it based on that as your plan, or did you just straight pants it from there?
So the main difference that we did, it's kind of in a way a melding of Aladdin and Alibaba.
Okay.
With the introduction of the Cave of Wonders and the Jinn. But otherwise, the storyline, we changed his age. Originally, Ali was an older person, and there wasn't, I believe, a father in the original story. It was just the two brothers in the different situations. But other than that, we stayed fairly true to the actual progression of the tale, with the adaptation of the female Jinn taking the place of the servant girl. And in the original, Ali is married and the servant girl is separate, and the servant girl marries Ali's son. So those are the subtle differences that we did.
And is this the first or second edition? So I know.
That is the second edition.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think one of the biggest struggles with this is if you look at the traditional telling of these stories, it is telling. It is not showing.
Exactly.
So telling covers a lot more in a very little space. So when we're trying to get into a story from a show perspective, when you're talking about writing, which is how the short story suddenly ballooned to novella and then novel length.
Yeah.
And we still were just chopping out sections left and right to be able to actually fit and get a nice narrative arc.
For those that missed the part of the conversation, it was originally written for Gaslight and Grimm. But by the time we finished the story, even with cutting out elements, it was 17,000 words. All the other stories were 5,000 words. The publisher took one look at it and said, "It's a book, go finish it."
I've got a problem with the short story I put in for another one. So yeah, yes, they balloon quickly. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. All right, Cindy Joy, you had a question before we wrap up.
It sounds like you're working on a sequel.
We're talking about it, but we haven't actually worked yet.
Okay, so in the works sometime before you die.
Hopefully.
Yeah. I mean, I've been the one who's been the stick in the mud because I've been buried in other things. But like I said, I've been itching to get back to some of the fictional sides of things, and maybe it's time. We left enough strings loose in this book purposefully.
Yeah.
That there are several places to pick up.
I very much like the characters and the world that you built. So
thank you.
No, I wouldn't mind reading another story.
I would love to read a sequel or a prequel.
So yeah, so we've got some pre-book sales for you.
There is one story that exists with Lady Clara, and I'm trying to think. If it's not out in print yet, it will be. I'm working on a steampunk short story collection that it'll be a part of. It was originally written for Athena's Daughters, which was published by Silence in the Library. That book isn't in print anymore, but you can get used copies, and if not, it will be coming out in print once I finish the steampunk collection.
Thank you, Danielle. And so as we are running a bit over and we're sort of wrapping up before...
I was just going to say I liked Lady Clara. I was going to say she was one of my favorite characters there. Okay.
Yeah, no, thank you, June. She's a marvelous character. I love that she pilots the airship. So yeah, we are running over as usual. We're really chatty and we love to talk books. But I know that everyone would like to find more of your work. So where can we find you, Danielle and Day? Where can people find more
Pop
of
the
your
link
work?
in.
I'm
Pop
going
it.
to make this easy. We just finished Virtual Farpoint. So as a publisher, I created a discount code for our online store, which I just put the link in the chat. And that gets you 15% off of all of the books. And I will point out, for those that are not aware, we did a limited edition hardcover when we crowdfunded the book to begin with, and those are only available on the eSpec website in limited quantity. For the other steampunk books, we have Afterpunk, Steam-Powered Tales of the Afterlife, and I have a story in there. And then we have Spirit Seeker by Jeff Young, which is a steampunk collection, and The Clockwork Witch by Michel de Saulnier, which is a novel, and the sequel is coming out this year.
Thank you very much, Danielle. And Day, I know you have shared many links to your WordPress, but is there anything you'd like for us to be looking out for coming from you?
Yeah. The WordPress stuff mostly is I wanted to put the behind the scenes stuff, because what Danny and I talk about so much, I'm like, oh no, there's fun stuff in there, and some of you guys caught some of it, and some of it you might not have seen, and so it's a nice way to put in some of those pieces. So where else to find me? I have a novella out with Falstaff Books, and it is a murder mystery in a fantasy setting. But it's mostly a fantasy setting because there's not as much time to bring as much tech in there, but it is going to slide into steampunk. There's no question there, but it's a fun story, and I wanted to do some of the same things that we did in Bab Ali, which is move away from the Western perspective. So for those of you who are nerds, it takes place in the Great Archive, which is modeled very much on the Library of Alexandria.
And the title.
Yeah, and the question is, were the people who created this refugees from the original collapse of the library, which actually took place more than once? So there's a good chance those folks did escape, and so that is that. And then part of the reason, sadly, that I did not get a chance, I have not had a chance to work with Danny in the last few years, is because I've ended up moving to documentary television. And for those of you who are history nerds, the other link there is to the public television link to the Invalid Core, which is my film that broadcast on public television in December. So yeah, it's one more Civil War film nobody wants to watch, but hey, it's like 30 minutes. It's nice and short, but I'm willing to bet you haven't seen that story before, because we ended up doing so much original research for it. And then the last link is just one of a part of a series of 3 essays that was done for American Masters. This, like I said, you can see all my history nerding out here. So some of you guys will get to that part. And I'm like, and this is where I just save that stuff like a magpie until it comes time to be used in steampunk. And that was actually focusing on folks, amazing people with disabilities you may have never heard of, and kind of a bit about their amazing lives. And the first one was Gouverneur Morris, who's one of the founding fathers, and that man was a player. He loved the ladies, and the ladies loved him. And it's great because he's the one who wrote "We the People of these United States." He created that phrasing. He also was the minister to France, who got thrown out of France because he tried to rescue Marie Antoinette. Wow. So I wanted to capture these fun, colorful kinds of folks that just don't get their stories told. So you'll see a little more of my history in film stuff. Like I said, The Labyrinth's Archivist is a fun little novella, which may have a sequel coming out depending on how much time I can finish with that. And yes, it was at Superfest at UCSF Longmore. So
wonderful. Thank you so much, Day. I feel like I have so much wonderful viewing and watching. And thank you for the links, but also for your time today. Thank you all for being here. Next month, we're going to be reading Pimp My Airship. I'm very excited. The title is so evocative of many things, but also airships. And thank you, Bill, for recommending that book to us. So we'll be diving into that. Watch for the event page. And do remember to go out and leave reviews for this wonderful book at all of your websites that you visit, Goodreads, and all of those lovely places. A nice public review, even just a sentence long saying, I loved it and I stayed up until 4 a.m. reading it, is good. I might resemble that.
Very helpful. As a small press author and publisher, it is very difficult to get people to take a chance on the work. Even though this one has been out for like, I can't even remember when we released the original, but it's been years and it keeps coming up, but that's not usual. And any time we can bring the book to people's attention and have people endorse it, it certainly helps us to keep it going so that we can write sequels.
Yes, so that you can write sequels. We're actually just selfish creatures and want you to write more, and this is how we get you to write more. So thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. A round of applause for our wonderful guests. Thank you for your time today.
And thank you for those that are up in the middle of the night just to talk to us.
Yeah.
Right, or the afternoon, or I mean, we are so many time zones here.
And
So,
in the middle of earthquakes. Be safe.
Oh my goodness. Please be safe. Thank you so much. And as I always say, please stay home, wear a mask, wash your hands, treasure yourselves. You are irreplaceable. And I would like to see you on the other side of this. So good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night.
Cheers.